When was the last time you took a moment to think about how your speaking was going? It's not a question we ask ourselves every day, right? I had a terrible public speaking experience about 5 years ago, and ever since I've been more mindful about how I speak and how I can improve my speaking. Speaking is a huge part of our daily lives. We use it to communicate with friends, colleagues and families, and we also use it to influence, persuade and to progress various projects. Being mindful of my speaking, I'm always looking for ways to get out of my comfort zone, and I'd heard of this organisation dedicated to speaking for a couple of years, and at the start of this year I finally took the plunge and joined. That organisation is a global organisation called Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a not-for-profit educational club run by members for members with the aim of improving public speaking, communication and leadership. At the start of this year, I joined my first Toastmasters meeting to see what it was all about, and what I saw was that it was very much a communication workshop whereby people learn by doing. People actually gave speeches to then receive feedback on their speeches from other club members. Personally, I think there's no better way to learn than by doing, so I was immediately attracted to Toastmasters, so I signed up there and then, and ever since I've been a member. This week I've been asked to give my first Toastmasters speech. This is what they call an icebreaker speech, where you introduce yourself to the club and you set the stage for what your future at the club might entail. So in the name of trying new things, I thought I would record my first ever Toastmasters speech. I'll admit I'm pretty nervous. I've never spoken for more than a minute to a group, but I'm excited to give it a go and see what I learn. It's worth mentioning that Toastmasters meetings are usually held in person, but because of our good old friend COVID-19, they are temporarily online. So all that's left for me to do is to try giving my first ever Toastmasters speech. Thank you very much, Madam Toastmaster. Good evening, fellow Toastmasters and most welcome guests. My name's Craig and I recently started my Toastmasters journey after having joined the Kent Toastmasters Club approximately 2 months ago. But for my speaking, the journey continues after having started about 5 years ago in a classroom filled with all the people in the world, would you believe it? Head teachers. I can remember the moment like it was yesterday. I'm standing there with 25 head teachers staring at me, waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to give them valuable information. This was my first ever proper speaking experience. I'd seen speaking in a public setting thousands of times before in films, TV shows and books. How hard could it be, right? So, what do? I take a deep breath, open my mouth ready to address the audience, and then nothing. I collapse in front of the audience like a crumbling tower of Jenga blocks. Disaster. For me, that was the experience that changed my relationship with speaking forever. So, who am I exactly? I'm a 23-year-old civil servant from Kent who loves to listen to and make music. I love the 3 triathlon sports. I'm a big fan of foreign languages. I'm currently learning French. I drink lots of coffee. I'm probably a caffeine addict. And I also like to explore and travel to new places. Personally, I believe that speaking is one of the most valuable tools we have access to in our lives, and throughout my time in Kent Speakers I would really like to develop my speaking. But back to that pivotal moment for me that changed my relationship with speaking forever. This memorable experience took place during the first few days of my first ever job. I was what they call an apprenticeship ambassador for a local government organisation. That meant it was my role to promote apprenticeships and communicate policy updates to schools, young people and employers. And in this particular instance, in the classroom with the head teachers, I've been asked to give an update and an explanation of my educational journey up to that particular point in time. Unfortunately for me, I knew absolutely nothing about public speaking and I thought I could wing it with zero planning, zero preparation and zero practice. And as you now know, I paid the consequences for that. Since then, I said to myself, never again. I can remember now me standing there in those few anxious, heart-wrenching moments, waiting for the ground to swallow me up when I said to myself, this is never going to happen again. Since that moment in time, I've been trying to develop my speaking and practice whenever I can by focusing on 3 distinct areas. And I really hope that by having joined Kent Toastmasters, I will be well on my way to doing so in a much quicker and more efficient fashion. The first of these areas is impromptu speaking. These are those moments in our lives that are unscripted and sometimes take us completely off guard. I, like many of you, have many moments in my life where I have to speak in a completely on-the-spot fashion without any prior planning and practice. Speaking in meetings and to colleagues at work, chatting to friends and family, giving updates to training partners on how I'm feeling when I'm training for a marathon or a triathlon, and also addressing audiences at gigs. Impromptu speaking is everywhere in my life, so I would really like to develop it. Personally, I believe that the key to effective impromptu speaking is great listening, because it's the information that you receive and then attach meaning to that allows you to formulate the best and most fit for purpose response so that you can hopefully add value to and progress the lives of others. So I think that if you're an effective listener, you will become one day a very good soundboard of which people can bounce good ideas off. Speaking about good ideas, that brings me to the second type of speaking I'd like to develop with Kent Speakers, which is that of presentations and speeches. Like a sculptor sculpts a statue or a poet pens a play, these are those speeches that you are able to plan in advance in a really eclectic fashion so that you can communicate the message and have the biggest impact in the best way possible. Speaking about having a really good impact, that brings me to the third type of speaking that I'd like to develop, which is that of experiences. At the start of this year, as a new challenge to get out of my comfort zone, I started a YouTube channel where I try brand new things to learn, grow, have fun and inspire others, and I'm often mindful of how the way I speak contributes to the overall viewer experience. So far on the channel, I've tried new things such as running 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours straight to raise money for Parkinson's UK, a brilliant charity, to trying the world's hottest chili pepper. And in addition to explaining what I'm doing and why, I often give in-the-moment updates to explain my thoughts and feelings to the audience. And I sometimes find this difficult due to the emotionally challenged and sometimes difficult circumstances. So I really hope that by having joined Kent Toastmasters, I can better express myself. Overall, I think speaking is one of the most powerful weapons in our life's armoury, and I think that there are huge rewards for those that choose to take the time to master speaking in the best way possible. To summarise, I once heard a quote by a Greek historian that said, "Let thy speech be better than silence," or be silent. I want each word I say and each sentence I construct in my life to add value to the lives of others and improve things in some way, shape or form. I really look forward to what my experience includes with Kent Toastmasters for the future, and I can confidently say that now, after having joined for my speaking, the journey continues. Thank you very much everyone, back to you, Madam Toastmaster. Well, there you have it, my first ever Toastmasters speech. I'll admit I was pretty nervous. I did mess up a few times and my mind went blank on a few occasions, but I'm happy to have given my first ever speech. It's crazy how quickly the time actually went. It felt like I was giving the speech for 2 minutes, when in actual reality I gave the speech for just over 6 minutes, which was slightly over the allotted time for the speeches by 8 seconds, but it's a good learning curve. What's good about Toastmasters is that your fellow club members offer you constructive feedback after your speech, so you know what you have done well and what recommendations you have for improving yourself. And I'll have to say that I completely agree with all of the feedback that was given to me, and they really centered around 3 different areas which I'll be focusing on myself for the future. The first of these is to think about varying my voice tonality, so rather than sounding like this all the time, which I am actually guilty of sometimes, I was advised to actually start adding inflections and embellishes onto various words when I'm speaking, just to sort of engage people, just so that they don't start switching off and sleeping when I'm speaking. The second point was a recommendation to slow down what I'm saying and to also make use of pauses, because as I'm sure you will have seen, I flew through the speech like a waterfall. I didn't stop once, and I didn't really add in any pauses for the audience to think and reflect about what I was saying. So that is definitely a piece of feedback which I'm going to take on board and start using in my own life. The third bit of feedback came from a very detailed and helpful message from one of the club members, which was to be more natural in the way in which I was speaking, because apparently it came across like I was reading from a script and it just seemed a bit too rehearsed and a bit too polished. And obviously when we're speaking in public, we want to achieve a conversational tone so that the audience can really relate to you as a person. I think this has something to do with my tendency to over-prepare for situations like this. I'll admit I did kind of write out each phrase, sentence and word that I was going to use in the speech, so it probably came across like a dramatic monologue in a Shakespeare play rather than a off-the-cuff conversational speech. I think something I need to work on is finding the right balance between preparation and spontaneity so that I can actually convey the message I want to convey without risking sounding too robotic and too rehearsed and too polished. In addition to these, a personal reflection I've had is to reduce the amount of content in my speech, because it did feel like it was really crammed, filled with information, which actually caused me to go over my allotted time by about 8 seconds. So in the future, I'm going to try reducing the amount of content. I think it was Picasso who said that art is the elimination of the unnecessary after all. All that being said, I'm happy to have given my first ever Toastmasters speech a go. I've had the opportunity to learn by doing, which is something I'm very passionate about. I've been given very specific, well thought out and tailored feedback from fellow club members on my speech, and I've gotten out of my comfort zone because I felt so nervous before giving my speech. If you're interested in joining Toastmasters, I will leave a link below the video in the description where you'll be able to find out more information on how you can join. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Thank you very much, and I will see you again next time.